Maybe one of the most remarkable aspects of being human is being able to apprehend the beauty in the structure and design of the material world. The symmetry and complexity of these structures is simply too astonishing, I would argue, to leave to mere time and chance, especially if we consider how the parts work to form the whole of a given system. Consider for a moment the constellations of the Milky Way galaxy alone, the predictable movements of planets in the solar system, the precise tilt of the Earth on its axis that makes seasons move by, the moon in its relation to tides, the hydrologic cycle, and the law of the conservation of mass, whereby nothing can be created nor destroyed, but merely rearranged or transformed from one state of matter to another. Consider, too, the human body, the profound, complex structure and design of the eye to behold our surroundings, the inner ear and its connection to balance, the glandular discharges of pheromones that attract us to others or repel us, the apparent design of the mind to make sense of the unspoken signals sent unintentionally by others, warning our guts of potential danger, the structure of the brain to process all of the incoming sensory data gives us a recognizable and coherent impression of the data, to see the designs of powerful men intent to dispossess the masses of their natural rights as human beings to reproduce their lives. Given the utter dominance of structure and design infused in the natural physical world and the conceptual worlds of our minds, it is vital that we see and understand the structuring of these worlds so that, as human beings, as citizens of nations, as members of communities, tribes, and families, we can recognize and address the threats posed to the things we cherish most. Language, the most important social, psychological, neurological, physiological, and cognitive construction of humanity, is the very foundation upon which all man-made structures arise. Language is the basis of all our capacities to engage in economic transactions, to construct the social and political world, the center of all our negotiations for power and prestige and position for access to members of the opposite sex, the pivotal manufacturing center from which all the products of our imagination and romantic encounters are born. If language is the unique property of cognition that elevates humans just above the animals of the kingdom and just below the angels, why are we so often misunderstood or not completely understood? This question begs the obvious follow-up. How then can we elevate our awareness of what we mean as speakers and writers who desire to be understood? What can we do to increase our own conscious awareness of the precision and clarity of the messages we intend to communicate, but so often fail to? Since we are already experts in the particular language variety we speak, in whatever speech community we were born and raised, there is another aspect of written and spoken expression that often escapes our attention. It is the metalinguistic lexicon, the language we use to talk about language. It is jargon for the student of language. Consider for a moment the profoundly sinister but clever new products coming into the market designed to dispossess the masses of their natural human rights to the world's resources. The so-called metaverse is the matrix designed to entice you and me to ignore the financialization and the commodification of the entire world, its natural resources, and its huge capacity of human capital markets. The jargon of this system of dispossession obscures and conceals the reality of what's really going on. Because we don't fully understand the meaning of this jargon, we remain ignorant of the programs of dispossession. Given the power of language to conceal the intent behind the construction of the metaverse, what better way to distract the masses from attending to the objective world than to lure all unsuspecting consumers through clever words into a mediated world of digital simulations where we, as embodied subjects, become objects in some tech guru's twisted fantasy for humanity. The very idea of the natural human being, born of a female human mother, experiencing subjective reality is, at present, morphing into the preeminent idea of a digital simulation of reality. So this very real big tech threat to human sovereignty and agency, to human freedom and dignity and human rights is unfolding right before us, right now. If language is the foundation of meaning-making, the very center of this foundation is the subject and the verb. If we want to understand the difference between truth and deception, we must isolate and assess the subject and the verb. If we want to be understood and want to be more consciously aware of what we are saying in speech and writing, we must raise our conscious awareness of what the subjects are and the verbs. What specific words are chosen as subjects and what words are chosen as the verbs. Of course, some verbs need objects, but that aspect of the sentence is for another time. How key is the subject and verb? Consider briefly the unassuming power in these two aspects of a declarative sentence. In the narrative of the burning bush, Moses attempts to decline the job offer given to him by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And from the sound of it, the job seems impossible to complete. Moses is instructed to confront Pharaoh and demand that the Israelites be released from bondage. Moses, however, is unsure anyone in Egypt will obey his declaration, so he asks, by whose authority can he, a lowly shepherd, issue such a command? He wants to know who's got his back. And God replies, you shall tell the people, I am sent you. Grammatically, this is fascinating, for we find that God is simultaneously subject and verb. The existing, self-existent I am, the subject of all seen and unseen ontological realities. Moses' response to the invitation to work is humorous. He admits that his language skills are not up to the task and thinks his brother is better suited to the job. The student of language would immediately see that the interaction in this story is another proof for the power of language to move hearts and minds. If God is the very source of all power, and if God therefore speaks, the power of his word moves in the creative act from thought to the state of being. If therefore the human being is made in the image of God, we are each subjects. We are free to act upon objects too. As speakers and writers, we must acquire awareness of where the subjects are and where the actions are in our own utterances. If we want to achieve higher levels of precision in communication, we must understand how to identify the subject and verb in order to understand if they agree with one another. The following presentation dives into this point more deeply. So often when anyone mentions grammar, the response tends to be utter boredom. I can relate. When I was in high school, college, studying the language, trying to learn how to write a complete sentence, I was often utterly mystified by any discussion of sentence-level grammar. So, as I said in the opening, subjects and verbs are quite important. A good way to think about them is to think about them in terms of slots. A slot is something that we put another thing into. For example, consider the grammar here of Germanic languages like English. In declarative sentences, like I love muffins, the subject I will be followed by the verb in the second slot. And in this case, the verb needs an object, which is the muffins. So SVO is the pattern for Germanic languages like English. In Altaic languages, such as Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, the grammar finds that the verb comes at the end of the sentence. Now, to make this easier, let's dispel some of the obscurity in any discussion we might have of grammar today. So there are some divisions. We can think about the study of grammar, sentence-level grammar, in a few different categories. So in one category, we would talk about the syntactic or the grammatical slots into which certain words appear. We can have discussions of the morphemes and phonemes in the language. And the approaches that we might take in discussing sentence-level grammar would be descriptive. That is, we might describe how people in real situations simply use the language. This is called a descriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammars are usually those you would find in elementary school, where you are drilled with certain rules for the development of a particular kind of speech, academic speech, if you will. Another way to think about the analysis of discourse is to focus on the meaning or semantics. Here we think about content words and function words, and here to discussions of the parts of speech, such as noun, verb, auxiliary verb, linking verb, pronoun, preposition, infinitive, etc. Another division is mechanics and punctuation. Sometimes we hastily say that people don't know grammar if they don't know how to use a semicolon or a comma, but this is not really the case. It's just a problem of learning the rules of mechanics. And then another way to analyze discourse, sentences, is to look at the rhetorical tropes and schemes that a writer uses. So the tropes tend to focus on the clever meanings that writers use, metaphor, simile, etc. And then schemes refer to the various kinds of patterns. So patterns, though, probably suggests to you the ordering of ideas. So the ordering of ideas, the ordering of words and sentences might confuse you with syntax. But maybe later on in the semester, we'll have a discussion of how analysis of syntax departs from analysis of rhetorical schemes. But for this lecture, I would like to simply focus on identifying subjects and verbs and asking a very simple question. Does the subject agree with the verb? Now, what does that mean? Usually, we refer to the number. Does a subject, for example, a singular subject, agree with its singular form of the verb that the writer chooses? So, one rule of thumb would be that the subject that we choose should agree with the verb in number. Now, when we're analyzing sentence-level grammar, sometimes in longer sentences, when we have modifiers in between the subject and its verb, we can sometimes mistake, for example, the object of a preposition for the subject of the sentence. So, rule of thumb, singular subjects take a singular form of the main verb, and a plural or compound subject takes a plural form of the main verb. So, for example, in this sentence, the girls with the bouquets of blue flowers do not want to sit with the boys with pink carnations on their lapels. Now, we have a number of nouns in this sentence. We have girls, bouquets, we have blue and flowers and boys, pink and carnations and lapels. Quite a number of nouns. But only one of these nouns, one of these so-called parts of speech, is actually serving as the subject of the sentence. So the point that I was making earlier, in the early part of this lecture, is it's important to be able to identify the subject and its verb so that we can understand the structuring of our thoughts. Well, if you look at what's separating the subject, girls, from its verb, do want, is what we call prepositional phrases. We'll get into this more deeply in the semester, but with bouquets is a prepositional phrase because with is a preposition and bouquets is an object of the preposition. Of is a preposition, and then flowers is a object of a preposition, of. Notice too that flowers is being modified by the adjective blue. I said earlier that blue is a noun, but in this case, in this particular grammar, it is serving as an adjective. Some more examples here. Yogi loves picnic baskets. Well, it seems that the singular subject, yogi, agrees with the singular form of the verb loves, and his adoration for something is being poured onto baskets. And the next example, Yogi and Boo Boo, like harassing the campers at Jellystone. So we've got the compound subject, Yogi and Boo Boo, agreeing with the plural form of the verb, like. So the predicate, like harassing. So it looks like the first two examples, the subjects and the verbs agree in number. Now the last one, they, along with the other park bears, plans to raid all campsites. It appears as though they is the subject, and it's being interrupted by prepositional phrases, separating those from the verb plans. Now, it appears as though plans is the singular form because it has an S. So the subject and verb here, we would say they don't agree in number because they is plural, it's a plural subject, and plans is the singular form. So a quick review of what we just said. The usual way to turn regular singular nouns into plurals is the same way we make regular singular verbs agree with regular singular nouns. We only add an S. Notice bears eat honey and bear eats honey. There are exceptions though, and as always when you study language, there are exceptions to rules, and here's one in English that can be somewhat confusing. So the pronouns all and most, any and more, none and some can be either singular or plural, depending on the objects they're representing. I'll show you an example. So notice that we have in the first clause, we have all of the land, and then a space for the verb, and his, and then we have another sentence, all of the diamonds, space, and then hers. It's probably pretty easy for the native speaker of the language to figure out that in the first clause, the correct form of the verb is the singular form, is, and in the second clause, the correct form of the verb is the plural form. Now, why should that be? It's because the object of the preposition of in the first example is singular and is therefore making the subject all the singular form. And you therefore must choose the singular form of the verb for all. So it's somewhat strange. In this case, the object is dictating what the subject will be. Will the subject be singular or will the subject be plural? In this case, in the second example, we have a somewhat different problem. Notice that diamonds is a plural form. So diamonds, the object of the preposition of, is morphing the subject all into a plural subject. Therefore, we must choose the plural form of the verb. It only becomes slightly more complicated. We have some singular constructions that are somewhat special. For example, either or. Either can be an adjective, as in this example. Either dish is tasty. Notice that dish is the subject being modified by either. Either can also be a pronoun. Either is tasty. And we have the whole construction. Either the steak or the lobster is acceptable. So the either or construction is dictating for us what the verb will be. In this case, singular form of the verb. The same thing could be said for the negative of the either or, which is neither nor. So neither can serve as an adjective. Notice that the subject of the clause is dish, modified by neither. Neither dish is good. It can also be a subject. So the pronouns can be subjects too. Neither of the dishes is good. We might mistake though that dishes is the subject, but it really isn't, because dishes follows the preposition of. We have then a prepositional phrase. Neither nor, neither the corn nor the cob is tasty. If you have problems, just take them individually, the structures. Neither the corn is tasty, nor the cob is tasty. Each. An adjective meaning every one of two or more considered individually. Each dish is excellent. Notice that the subject is dish and it's being modified by the adjective each. Each can be a pronoun as well, meaning every one individually, each one. Each is totally fabulous. Every as well can be a pronoun, meaning one of a group or series taken collectively. Also, it can be an adjective. Every possible way is examined for its utility. So notice that the subject is way, being modified by every and possible. Okay, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to field the questions during our next meeting. But for now, I would like for you to check out the handout and try your hand at working out what the subject is and what the verb is, and we'll have a discussion of those next week.